The sound of metal hitting concrete echoed through Sycamore Ridge's most meticulously manicured neighborhood like a gunshot. Diane Hartwell's sledgehammer descended again, sending another massive chunk of her backyard swimming pool crashing into a growing pile of broken concrete and fractured tiles. Her next-door neighbor, Margaret Pemberton, known to everyone in the Sycamore Ridge Homeowners Association as the most notorious rule enforcer, stood rigid at her pristine white picket fence, binoculars pressed against her eyes. Her mouth was a thin, disapproving line of bright red lipstick. "This is a violation." Margaret's voice cut through the morning air like a razor. "You can't just demolish a permanent structure without AGOA approval." Diane didn't even turn around. The 38-year-old software engineer had dealt with Margaret's particular brand of neighborhood tyranny for years. The pool, a 20-year-old eyesore that came with the house, had been nothing but a maintenance nightmare. Cracked tiles, outdated design, constant repair costs. She was done. "I'm removing a personal property improvement," Diane called back, her hammer striking another precise blow. "Not building something new." Margaret's fingers were already flying across her smartphone, no doubt composing a furious email to the HOA board. Her chalky capras and perfectly pressed polo shirt seemed to vibrate with righteous indignation. In Margaret's world, every action required multiple forms, signatures, and at least 3 committee approvals. The pool had been a point of contention since Diane moved in 3 years ago. Its faded blue tiles and worn concrete edges were an affront to Margaret's vision of suburban perfection. Never mind that the pool was on Diane's own property, within her own fenced backyard. Margaret believed in regulations the way some people believe in religion, absolute, unquestionable, and with zealous conviction. "You need a demolition permit," Margaret shouted, now recording video on her phone. "You need an architectural review. You need permission to breathe." Diane muttered under her breath, continuing her methodical destruction. This wasn't just about a pool. This was about control. About Margaret's decade-long reign as the self-appointed guardian of Sycamore Ridge's aesthetic and behavioral standards. She once complained about a neighbor's garden gnome being 2 inches taller than the HOA-approved maximum height. She reported another resident for having trash cans visible from the street 15 minutes before the authorized retrieval time. Diane knew exactly what was coming. Within hours, there would be a formal complaint, possibly a fine. Definitely a strongly worded letter detailing every microscopic regulation she was allegedly violating. What Margaret didn't know was that Diane had already done her homework. Every permit was in order. Every regulation had been meticulously checked and double-checked. This pool was coming out, HOA or no HOA. The next sledgehammer blow rang out, punctuating Diane's determination. Another chunk of concrete crashed to the ground, a small rebellion against suburban conformity. Margaret's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. The Sycamore Ridge HOA emergency meeting was called exactly 3 hours after Diane's first sledgehammer strike. Margaret had made sure of that, flooding the group chat with no less than 17 messages, each more dramatically worded than the last. Conference Room B of the community clubhouse looked like a war council. 12 board members sat around a polished mahogany table, Margaret front and center, her stack of printed evidence standing nearly 6 inches high. Printed emails, photograph measurements, annotated satellite images of Diane's backyard. "This is unprecedented." Margaret's pointer finger jabbed at a blown-up photo of the pool demolition. "She's destroying community property values with her reckless behavior." Harold Jenkins, the HOA board president, adjusted his reading glasses. At 72, he'd seen every possible neighborhood dispute imaginable. His weathered hands shuffled through the documents, looking for any technical violation. "Actually," he said slowly, "it appears Ms. Hartwell has all necessary permits. City engineering signed off. Building inspector approved. Her contractor's credentials are impeccable." Margaret's face fell. This was not the script she prepared. "But the aesthetic impact," she sputtered. "The precedent. If we allow this, what's next? People removing entire landscaping? Changing exterior paint without committee approval?" The room shifted uncomfortably. Most board members were thinking about their own renovation plans, carefully hidden from Margaret's watchful eye. They'd all bent rules before, just quietly, without her knowing. Outside the conference room, the neighborhood was buzzing. Diane's pool demolition had become the most exciting thing that happened in Sycamore Ridge since the great sprinkler system upgrade of 2019. Neighbors texted. Neighbors gossiped. Neighbors took not-so-subtle drive-bys to watch the progress. Margaret wasn't finished. She never was. By 3:47 p.m., she filed an official complaint with both the HOA board and local law enforcement. The complaint was 17 pages long, single-spaced, with 17 different alleged violations. Font size 11, Times New Roman, with color-coded annotations. "This is harassment," Diane muttered to herself, reading the official document that had been taped to her front door. Margaret's handwriting was so precise it looked like it had been printed. What Margaret didn't know was that Diane was a software engineer who understood systems better than most. She already anticipated every possible move, documented everything, and was 3 steps ahead. The pool demolition was just the beginning. By sunset, the backyard looked like an archaeological dig site. Concrete chunks, exposed earth, the promise of something new emerging from the destruction of the old. Diane stood back, surveying her work, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Margaret would make her next move soon, and Diane would be ready. The first police cruiser arrived at 7:18 a.m., its lights barely cutting through the morning mist. Officer Ryan Martinez stepped out, coffee in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He'd seen Margaret Pemberton's complaints before, meticulously documented, legally questionable, and always dramatically overstated. Destruction of community property, the dispatch had said. Martinez knew better. Diane was already outside, dressed in work boots and a faded Stanford Engineering Department t-shirt, surrounded by excavation equipment. Her backyard looked like a controlled chaos of demolition and possibility. Ms. Hartwell, Martinez approached, clipboard in hand. Diane raised an eyebrow. "I'm guessing this is about the pool?" Before he could respond, Margaret materialized from next door. She was dressed for battle in a pressed khaki pantsuit, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a military-precise bun. In her hand, she clutched a 3-ring binder that looked like it could be used as a weapon. "Officer, this is a clear violation of Sections 4.2, 7.3, and 9.6 of the Sycamore Ridge Iowa bylaws." Margaret's voice carried the precision of a drill sergeant. Martinez took a long sip of coffee, his expression suggesting he'd heard this speech or something remarkably similar countless times before. Diane's contractor, Mike Rodriguez, emerged from the excavation site. A 45-year-old veteran of countless home improvement projects, he'd seen neighborhood drama play out more times than he could count. "Everything's permitted," Mike said casually. "City approved. Engineering checked. We're good to go." Margaret's face turned a shade of red that suggested her blood pressure was reaching dangerous levels. But the aesthetic continuity, the property values, "Ma'am," Officer Martinez interrupted, "is there an actual crime being committed?" The silence that followed was spectacular. Mike couldn't help himself. He started chuckling. Diane joined in. Even Martinez's shoulders started to shake with suppressed laughter. Margaret stood there, binder clutched to her chest, looking like a deflating balloon of righteous indignation. "This is harassment," she finally sputtered. "I'll take this to the city council, to the state legislature if I have to." Diane stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "Margaret, the pool is on my property. It's old, it's a maintenance nightmare, and I'm replacing it with something more functional. Everything is legal." The excavation continued around them. Concrete chunks, exposed earth, the promise of transformation. Martinez finished his coffee, tossed the cup in a nearby trash bin. "Looks like everything's in order here," he said, turning to his cruiser. "Have a good day, folks." Margaret stood frozen, her carefully constructed world of rules and regulations crumbling faster than the old concrete pool. Diane allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Round 1. Complete. The HOA newsletter arrived precisely 1 week after the pool demolition incident. Margaret had weaponized the monthly publication, transforming it from a bland community update into a thinly veiled attack on Diane's character. Unauthorized PFRPERTDLI modifications, a 3.8 to community standards, screamed the headline in bold 16-point Arial font. Diane read the article over her morning coffee, a mix of amusement and irritation brewing alongside her espresso. The piece was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive reporting. Margaret had somehow managed to turn a routine pool removal into a potential neighborhood apocalypse. "Architectural integrity is the backbone of our community," the article proclaimed. "Rogue homeowners who act without proper consultation threaten the very fabric of our carefully maintained suburban ecosystem." Mike Rodriguez, her contractor, couldn't stop laughing when Diane showed him the newsletter. "She's something else," he chuckled, tracing the new landscaping plans for Diane's backyard. The plans were revolutionary, at least by Sycamore Ridge standards. Instead of the standard cookie-cutter backyard, Diane was creating an eco-friendly native plant garden. Drought-resistant, low-maintenance, completely against everything Margaret represented. Meanwhile, Margaret had launched her next offensive. She discovered that Diane needed to submit a landscape modification request to the HOA board. The form was 17 pages long, requiring everything short of a DNA sample and a firstborn child's sworn testimony. Diane was a software engineer. Paperwork was her playground. She began filling out the form with surgical precision. Every I dotted, every T crossed. Each answer was a weapon, carefully crafted to comply with and subtly mock every possible regulation. Botanical names instead of common names. precise square footage calculations, intricate diagrams showing root systems, water runoff patterns, and ecological impact. She even included a comprehensive sustainability report that would make an environmental scientist weep with joy. Margaret would have to read every single word. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Diane knew Margaret would be there, binder in hand, ready to wage war. But Diane had been preparing. Her documentation was so thorough, so meticulously researched, that it would make a NASA mission plan look like a child's crayon drawing. As the excavation continued, the old pool's remnants slowly disappeared. In its place, a vision of sustainable landscaping began to take shape. Native grasses, pollinator-friendly plants, a small water feature that would actually conserve more water than the old chlorine-filled pool ever did. Margaret didn't know it yet, but she was about to lose her most important weapon, the element of surprise. The neighborhood watched and waited. Sycamore Ridge hadn't seen this much excitement since the great garbage bin color controversy of 2017. The HOA board meeting room felt like a pressure cooker of suburban tension. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow on Margaret's meticulously prepared presentation. She'd arrived 2 hours early, her binder color-coded with 17 different tabs, each representing a potential violation of Diane's backyard transformation. Harold Jenkins, the board president, looked like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. His reading glasses perched precariously on the end of his nose, a silent testament to years of neighborhood disputes. Item number 7, Margaret began, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, unauthorized property modification by resident Diane Hartwell. Diane sat calmly, slim folder resting on her lap. Her outfit was professional but relaxed, a tailored blazer over a simple white shirt. She looked like someone who had done her homework, thoroughly. The first slide of Margaret's presentation appeared, a dramatic before and after of the pool demolition with red circles highlighting what she claimed were egregious violations. The font was size 24, bold, and a shade of red that suggested imminent disaster. As you can see, Margaret continued, "This is a clear breach of our community standards. The structural integrity of our neighborhood is at stake." Harold Jenkins cleared his throat. "Miss Pemberton, could you be more specific?" What happened next was nothing short of a masterclass in bureaucratic warfare. Diane opened her folder. Permits, geological surveys, water conservation reports, ecological impact studies. Each document was more impressive than the last. She turned her backyard renovation into a mini environmental research project. The existing pool was a water consumption nightmare, Diane explained calmly. My proposed native landscaping will reduce water usage by 67%. I've consulted with 3 separate environmental engineers and a local botanical conservancy. Margaret's carefully constructed argument began to crumble like poorly mixed concrete. The board members leaned forward. They were engineers, accountants, professionals who appreciated data, and Diane was speaking their language. Charts appeared. Graphs materialized. Detailed calculations showed water savings, ecological benefits, and long-term property value improvements. Margaret's dramatic presentation looked like a child's science fair project compared to Diane's comprehensive analysis. Furthermore, Diane continued, her voice steady, the existing pool violated 3 current building codes. It was a potential liability for the homeowner and the association. Silence descended on the room. Mike Rodriguez, waiting outside, could hear the metaphorical pins dropping. Margaret's binder seemed to deflate. Her perfectly pressed khaki suit suddenly looked a size too big. The red circles on her presentation slides now seemed comically dramatic. Harold Jenkins adjusted his glasses. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. The tide was turning, and Margaret knew it. The aftermath of the HOA meeting spread through Sycamore Ridge faster than gossip at a neighborhood book club. Margaret Pemberton had been publicly and systematically dismantled, her years of tyrannical rule reduced to a stack of irrelevant paperwork. Diane's backyard transformation became the talk of the neighborhood. Native plants began to take root, a sophisticated drainage system emerged. What was once a crumbling, chlorine-filled relic was becoming an ecological showcase. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Margaret launched her final offensive. She organized a neighborhood walkthrough. Armed with her ever-present binder and a group of similarly frustrated retirees, she marched down Sycamore Ridge's immaculate streets. Her mission, to find something, anything, to discredit Diane's project. Mike Rodriguez watched from the sidewalk, barely containing his laughter. "You're enjoying this way too much," Diane muttered, arranging some native grasses. "Are you kidding?" Mike grinned. "I've dealt with Hinoa Karens for 20 years. This is better than Netflix." The walkthrough group approached. Margaret led like a general, her chalky outfit pressed within an inch of its life. Behind her, a contingent of mostly older residents looked equal parts curious and skeptical. "Ecological nonsense," Margaret muttered loud enough to be heard. reducing property values, destroying community standards. But something was different this time. The other neighbors weren't nodding in agreement. They were looking at the emerging landscape, really looking. The native garden was transforming the space. Drought-resistant plants created a tapestry of greens and subtle colors. A small water feature attracted local birds. Strategically placed stones created natural pathways. It was beautiful, practical, intelligent. Harold Jenkins stepped forward, examining a particularly impressive cluster of native wildflowers. Fascinating implementation, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Margaret's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling, again. Her group of supporters began to drift away, more interested in the actual landscape than her manufactured outrage. An elderly woman in a floral print dress stopped, pulled out a pair of gardening gloves, and asked Diane about her plant selection. "This is how ecosystems heal," the woman said, touching a delicate native grass, 1 yard at a time. Margaret stood alone. Her binder suddenly looked heavy, unnecessary. Diane didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The landscape was speaking for itself, a living, growing testament to intelligent design and ecological responsibility. Mike leaned in. "Round 6, he whispered. Knockout. The Sycamore Ridge annual community picnic arrived like a social crucible. Every resident would be there, including Margaret and Diane. The tension was as palpable as the store-bought potato salad. Diane arrived with Mike Rodriguez, her contractor, who looked more like a neighborhood diplomat than a construction professional. They carefully selected a display board showcasing the ecological transformation of her backyard. Photographs, water conservation data, native species information. Margaret wore white capri pants and a polo shirt that screamed, "I'm still in charge," despite recent events. Her approach to the picnic was tactical, a last-ditch effort to rally support and discredit Diane's project. The picnic pavilion buzzed with subdued conversation. Neighbors glanced between Diane and Margaret like spectators at a highly civilized boxing match. Harold Jenkins, HOA board president, made his way to Diane's display. He adjusted his reading glasses, studying the detailed ecological report with growing interest. Behind him, a group of neighbors craned their necks to see. "Remarkable water savings," Harold muttered. "Impressive native species integration." Margaret's perfectly maintained smile began to crack. The community's perspective had shifted. What once would have been seen as rebellion was now viewed as innovation. Diane had transformed a simple pool removal into a neighborhood conversation about sustainability, water conservation, and intelligent landscaping. Mike leaned close to Diane. "Watch this," he whispered. A group of younger homeowners gathered around the display. They were asking questions, taking photos, discussing potential similar projects for their own properties. Margaret's worst nightmare was unfolding in real time. The potluck proceeded with an undercurrent of social drama. Casseroles were passed. Passive-aggressive comments were thinly veiled, but the tide had definitively turned. "I heard she saved over 50,000 gallons of water annually," one neighbor whispered loud enough to be heard. "Those native plants attract beneficial insects," another added. Margaret stood alone, her plate of untouched deviled eggs a silent testament to her isolation. Diane didn't seek triumph. She didn't need to. The landscape spoke for itself, a living, breathing argument against mindless suburban conformity. As the afternoon progressed, something remarkable happened. Neighbors began discussing their own potential landscaping projects, water-efficient designs, native plant corridors, sustainable improvements. Margaret watched, her influence crumbling like decade-old concrete. The old pool was gone, but something far more significant had emerged in its place. A new way of thinking about community, sustainability, and individual property rights. Mike caught Diane's eye and winked. Sometimes victory was quieter than anyone expected.